Hi, my name's Kevin Starr and I'm with ABB. We're now on our third video that talks about the execution or the engagement model with you. Is how do we help you logically progress through this jungle of digital that you see coming on us. We are in the middle of an exciting time. We are in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Things are changing. Things are going to get better. Things are improving. And the digital space isn't something that we should be scared of. We should embrace it, but you should do it in a logical approach. Our first video, we talked about the problem that we're trying to solve by telling the digital story. The second video was how do you know where to start? You know, how do I figure out what problem I have and how do I balance my service? Those are the different components of the first two videos. This one, if you're just tuning in, that's fine. We're going to talk about the engagement process. We're going to talk about how we recommend that you move forward with the digital progression or your digital journey. Because you're seeing things that what can be done on premise or locally, what can be done at the plant for consolidation, what can be done at enterprise where you're actually pulling multiple sites together. There's extreme power when you start doing that. And the digital world, cloud computing, data analytics, data science, there's awesome things that are coming, but it starts here. And that's what I want to start with and show you. So what you see here is there's different digital solutions, and ABB is a leader and a pioneer in automation, electrification, control platforms, telecommunications. If you get into wireless meshes, you get into digital signatures, you get into data transfers, you get into data. We have all of that, and we are actually equipping the next generation of sensors, you can see at the bottom there, with the ability to be interconnected. Many of them already are with our drives, our pumps, our actuation. I mean, many are already connected. And so we can help you depending on where you have your pain points. We can start where you're at. We've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. So we still have the manual techniques and the opportunities that we've had for years. But as we move forward, we really can't do what we used to and expect different results. We have to look at how do we cast a bigger net instead of fish with a hook. How do we fish with a net? This is what allows us to sense, analyze, and act on a much more regular basis. So as this information comes together, we can do better, do more, we can know more, and we can work together. There's so many exciting examples of digital being used to look at trends. You know, I tell people, if you see that sort of that vapor cloud in the sky, you don't automatically think, I wonder what that was. That was an airplane. Well, the plane may be long or a jet, but it left a trail. That's the digital signature. Most, if not all, assets have a digital signature, and a lot of our solutions actually came from that. Years ago, and I still get called in to troubleshoot industrial sites, the system would be down, and I'd have to go in there and try to fix it. And I start going through, and at that time it was hard to pull the data together. And we'd start to see these models, these signatures that aligned with the failure. And we started thinking, you know, if I could have been here yesterday, I could have prevented this failure. That's really the impetus behind all of our advanced services, is how could we look at the data, how can we model its trends in such a way that we can gauge your performance and we can tell when you're about to break or if you've already broken. We can tell that through numbers and math. It's just not me saying, I'm smart, you're stupid, do this. No, we look, and that doesn't work anyways. If ever a consultant comes and tries to tell you how smart he is, ask for the data. You know, let's get back to the brass tacks. That's what we do, is we get back to the data. We designed it, we know what it's supposed to look like, and we can tell you when it's broken. In the data scientist realm, that's called white box analytics. We know everything about our assets and functions. You know everything about your process. That's where the black box analytics come in. It's when you tie those two together that the magic happens. And that's what I'm going to show you here, is how can we take what we've done for years, what you know, how can we marry those in a collaborative manner so that we can move forward. Now, this particular slide, I put this up there because it shows how long I've been doing this. I'll let you figure out which one's me. But there's diagnose the problem, implement the solution, and then keep it fixed, sustain. It's always been three things. That's how you troubleshoot it. If you've taken Six Sigma or Black Belt, they break it down into diagnose the problem, implement the solution, keep it fixed. So when we diagnose the problem, we want to take the raw data, run it through our analytics, and come up with a performance vector, and then show you where you're at compared to that. That's back to what I was saying, is don't let someone tell you they're smart and you're stupid. get it and compare it to a performance standard. Then that allows you to more clearly see which problems you need to solve. And then once you solve those and see that it in fact changes your performance vectors, then you have a sustainable performance index that you can manage. And then once you manage it, you have a platform that allows you to grow in a continuous improvement process. So we can diagnose, we can implement, and we can sustain. That's the fundamentals, but it gets a little more complicated than that because our asset class and our function class and our product is so big. So what we've done here is we've mapped our solutions into quadrants. Our diagnostic solutions allow us to look at the information, process it with our analytic tools that we've developed models from for years. We have benchmarks that allow you to have a performance vector. We have fingerprints, which take those performances and give you value and an implementation plan. The design is the tools that we utilize to improve the design. You can use them, we can use them. Then you get into implementation where you actually fix the issue. So you may already know, and that's what we talked about in the last video. That's fine. If you already know the problem, we'll come in and fix it, or help you fix it, or fix it together. But if you don't know, or you're looking at a symptom but it's not really the source, we need to start with the diagnostic and the design so that we know that we're fixing the right thing. But please don't stop after you've implemented the solution. You need a sustain component. The sustain can be a manual process that gets done once a year. That's typically how this starts. It's a manual process once a year, and then you want it every 6 months, then you want it every quarter, then you want it every week, and then you're like, I want this every day. We have modules, boxes that we can plug, black box recorders on assets and functions that allow us to look at these KPIs on a regular basis. And that's the great information that the data lakes, the data scientists like to look at the interactions and the multi-asset causality so we can start finding trouble. This is the consulting ring that allows us to grow. So this circle is what we got to get spinning for you, but how do you know where to start? The diagnostic phase. We recommend that you start with a benchmark. A benchmark is simply a way to take a set of data, run it through our analytics engines that we've already designed for years and years and years to come up with a performance profile, red, yellow, green. Green good, yellow not so good, red's bad. So that you can, and these are very, if you provide us with the data, it's a couple days worth of work. So that's what we're trying to start with, is a benchmark based on our data analytics. And often this becomes the recurring thing so you can have a trend of KPIs. So that's the benchmarks, the first phase. Then the benchmark leads to a gap so we can know where you're supposed to be and where you're at. Then, well, how much is the gap worth? Is there any financial justification to move forward? That's the fingerprint. The fingerprint really requires us to do a deep dive with you. We look at your production. We look at your criticality. We look at your assets. We look at your operating processes. We look at your methods. We look at a lot of things, and we take the performance indices, map them with your process to a solution profile that is aligned based on value. Then it makes it very easy for you to decide, well, what do I do? You know, which direction do I go? And so what we do is we show you the limits to your gap. What's causing your performance to be down, and how much is each cost worth in terms of an ROI? That's the fingerprint. And once we have that, then together we can sit down and decide, how do we fill this back up? What's our implementation plan? How do we align the corrections to the findings? And that's a discussion. It's not us telling you, but what it does is it sort of breaks the problem apart. We do a diagnostic phase based on data and analytics, no question. These have been proven KPIs. Then we sit down with you and link the KPIs to financial indicators. Then we take the financial indicators and look at the barriers to your performance, and then we come up with an implementation plan that you can then decide to do yourself or work with us, or we do it together. But don't forget that after you've implemented your solutions, we recommend sort of doing it in a piecemeal kind of in weeks or hours of a contract, and to work through those is once you fix it, you should see a direct causality between the benchmark KPIs and the implementation that you did. We don't want you fixing things just because we said. We want to see it in the numbers, and that's when you really start taking this bias away of, well, you're right and I'm wrong. It's like, hey, we're working together here. But once you get it working, people tend to forget that results do erode over time. These are moving parts, whether it's a control loop or an actuator or a hard drive. They will not be that way forever. So there has to be some sort of a mitigation plan or a sustained plan, and that's where we need to work together in terms of, do you do this once a year, once a month, once a quarter, every day, 3 times a day? Depending upon your answer depends upon the solution. Yes, we have solutions that can plug into your site. Do you want to get notified on your phone when something deviates outside of those particular trends? Do you want to increase the performance vector? Those are all things that you then have a control over once you follow this process. Again, this process is applied to all of our assets and functions, and I'll show you that here at the end. So in general, what we have here is, this is the sort of the flow chart summary, is we recommend that whether it's an asset or a function or your process, you come in through a benchmark. It's very short, very time efficient. We have engineering efficient tools that this used to take forever. I mean, it took me 10 or 100 hours to do 10 loops. So this wasn't really a product. But over the time, as a result of the digital age and our analytics engines, we could take what used to take 100 hours and really crunch it down to just a few hours. Imagine being able to know, if you have 1,500 loops, which ones are good, bad, and ugly. You know, imagine your alarms, imagine your safety, your cyber, and knowing that constantly. Imagine having that up on a screen so that it's trending. Imagine you're always on top of your issue. We don't want you to be reacting to problems anymore, not when you don't have to. These solutions are there to be proactive and get on front of this so that you can know you've got the right answer. You can know your system's up and running. You can know that when that phone rings, you're covered. You've got the parts in stock. You know it was going to break. You don't get surprised. That's what we're after. So the benchmark is a step. It's little risk, no risk. You can provide the data, whether it's alarm data or cyber data or loop data. We can provide instructions on how to do that. If we need to send a guy to help or send a person to site to help, well, we'll work with you on that. Then we work with, that gives you a performance. You're like, well, shoot, you know, everything's red. Well, what's the value of that? Well, that's the fingerprint. That's where we're going to spend a couple of weeks working with you and aligning your process, your operations to the value to determine the causality of why you're all red and not green, and what are the steps. And that's where you have a couple choices. At that point, we can give you an implementation plan. You can go and fix it yourself. You can use our design tools, or you can fix it yourself. What we have found to be the most successful way to do this is to come up with a sustainable performance program where we actually set up a cadence where we fix the issues and then we manage the KPIs. We fix the issues and make sure we see it, and you do that on a regular basis. That's more of a project or a performance type of solution. We call those care agreements in the performance space. So this is really how we recommend that you move forward, is you don't have to tackle your entire problem space. Remember in the last video we said, are you safe, are you reliable, are you optimized, and do you know it? If you don't know it, start with a benchmark, and then we can work through it. So all you have to do is look at your system, ask those questions, and we can help respond with the appropriate results. Now, as the digital space, this is all on-premise type of things, and those are solutions that we can do now. I'm showing you this phase 1 is the sort of the local premise, the local mode, where you can do this by yourself or have a person go to site. So it's on-site type of work. Because we recognize you don't have all the latest sensors. You may have old sensors. So remember, we've done this for a long time. So we have data sockets, we have data connections, and we can actually hook up to vendor neutral in a vendor neutral manner. So it doesn't have to be an AV equipment in many cases. Those are things we need to talk about, but we can help on-premise come up with benchmarks, fingerprints, and help you start making money on your site now and removing your barriers. But the next phase is where we're starting to see this plant consolidation. What we've sort of done is develop siloed-based analytics. So you may have a silo of loop, that everyone knows loop, and then another for alarm, and another for safety, and another for cyber, another for electrical. So we have all these silos. But did you realize sometimes that a problem goes across the silos? For example, maybe you had a cyber attack that started eating up resources. The resources start slowing down your controller. Your controller starts slowing down your PIDs. Then you start having alarms, and then you have a safety breach. You may have a person looking at all 5 silos, and they all think they had a problem. Plant consolidation allows us to pull this information together and find the source and not the symptom. It reduces your problem space, it reduces your time to resolution, and it allows you to stay in control of your plant. So we are moving in the direction of plant-wide analytics. You still have to have the pieces, you have to have the assets, you have to have the functions, and you have to have the process. You have this expertise, but what bridges those together? The digital space bridges those together. The AB Ability digital space allows us to pull these assets and functions together so that we can control your plant. Now, once we've done that, the next step is the enterprise level. And that's where you hear us talk about cloud, intercloud, big data, Azure. There's a whole bunch of things in the cloud space that we're talking about. And that's another layer. And we have that, and you may want that. But we don't recommend that you just start there, as you need to start with a solution at your local premise, go to plant, and then work up to the fleet-wide or the enterprise. So let's say now you have multiple plants. Basically, I've had a chance to go to I was at the same site on two different parts, two different globes, one in the northern and southern hemisphere. They made the same product. I got a free trip to each one and did this by hand. It was horribly difficult. And then we had to do all this data, and it took weeks and weeks and weeks to compare the performance of two very, very different operations making the same product. In the digital space, it would have been at the corporate office immediately, and they would have been able to see one was having a lot of failures because of dirty power and the other one wasn't. And it would have saved everybody time and money. That place almost had to shut down a facility. Today, in the big data, in the cloud computing, we can do enterprise and we can do fleet analytics. We can do plant analytics, and we can still do asset and functions at your local site. We have the ability to do all three of those. That's what these triangles are representing. We recommend that you start with a collection of assets and functions. A very good suite that people are liking is Alarm, Cyber, and Loop. You can do those. Or maybe you do your 800XA, your rotating equipment, and parts. You know, pick a bundle, and then we don't try to solve the entire portfolio at once. That's where people start twitching. They're trying to go all the way to the phase 3. What I want you to be aware is that AB has answers at each phase. Those circles mean something. Those are the access points. How do we collect data? If you have a legacy system, how do we get data? What's the sample integration, sample resolution? What's the compression? How do I access? Can I collect data safely? Those have to be answered on each asset and function. Then the data analytics, we have that covered at the asset and function and the process. Then you get into the plant consolidation. That's where you start working with your IT folks. You start looking at data moving and consolidating and building dashboards, still on premise or at a plant. Then when you go into the cloud, you can have intercloud, you can have extra cloud, you can have different solutions when you're comparing fleets. And yes, we can still do it manually. You can still send data from one node to the next manually. We have answers, and we can work with you no matter where you're at. But if you're not making money at the base, then do you really need to see it at the top? So why don't we get it working at the base and work up? That's how we recommend moving through this. So what we have is a project plan. This is, I know, sort of difficult to see, but each one, there's a kickoff meeting. How are we going to discuss what components do you want us to work with? What's the configuration? Do we have to do any training? Are we going to set up alerts? How are we going to validate the alerts? And then we can actually have an ending point, and we can validate the value of that. ABB doesn't want to do anything for you that doesn't produce value. So let's not try to solve the entire thing at once. Let's solve an asset bundle, or assets and functions in a local area. We can do benchmarks on your loops, alarms, your safety. We can tell you your performance. We can move to the value. We can come up with implementation, and then we can set up a sustainability program. And then as you make money, we can grow this matrix. So that's how we recommend that you tackle the digital journey. Recognize that you have the option to go to cloud computing. Recognize that you have the ability to go to comparisons at the enterprise level. But recognize you need to get started, and we can start now at your assets and your functions. So this is an example of showing kind of a client that we were working with, and they were interested in control loop efficiencies. And so what we did, that bottom triangle would be like phase 1. We were pulling all their loops at one particular process area together and started providing analytics on those. And that was manual to all those little people like ants that we would send data, and they used tools on the collection of information. As that got better, we expanded to other parts of their plant and then pulled that information into a sort of a data lake or a consolidation node, and then that allowed a suite of engineers. Some were ours, some were theirs, some were local, some were remote. But it was a collaboration, and all of a sudden we started seeing magic happen. It wasn't just, is this loop an auto or manual? It's the interactions, it's the relationships. We started seeing trends, and we started improving the process of that plant. And then the corporate folks wanted to be able to see that across their fleet. So we'd already set the stage, and then it was just a connection through their secure network so that the corporate folks could actually see it. So on the right, you can see, if we start, that's what that red bar is. Start with something you can do locally in an area, and let's define a project and go for it. And then we start moving it across in a cookie cutter manner across your fleet, and then we can actually do an enterprise solution so that you can have all three. So for you, the take home is, do you have a digital progression? What are you doing locally in each area? What are you doing at your plant to pull those together? And what are you doing at the fleet? So put a check marks. Do you have those covered? 5 years from now, 1 year from now, you'll have more X's sliding to the right. The sooner you get started, the sooner you can take advantage of the digital revolution that we're in the middle of right now. Don't be scared of it, embrace it, and we can help you. We can mitigate the false positives. We can stop at any point. We don't have to go all the way to the top. We can have secure connections. We can have manual connections. We still use people. It's part of the solution. The technology is one thing. The process that I showed you is another, but people are such a vital part of this equation. Our digital solution takes all three. It takes your folks, it takes our folks, it takes these tools, these processes, and we can make it happen together. So plug into ABB, we've got you covered.